A fast food chain had to remove a number from their menu system, not because of a lawsuit, not because of a shortage, because teenagers kept losing their minds every time an employee said it out loud. The number was 67. In-N-Out actually removed it from their ticket system entirely. Orders now skip straight from 66 to 68. Because every time a worker called out 67, crowds of teenagers would erupt into chaos. A whole country's prime minister accidentally did the hand gesture during a school visit and had to apologize afterwards. A cartoon show wrote an entire episode about it. Hundreds of schools across multiple continents have banned two numbers, 6 and 7, from being said back to back unless it was literally a math problem. All of that for a phrase that means genuinely, probably, nothing. In the next 15 minutes, I'm explaining how 6-7 became one of the strangest, most powerful pieces of language on Earth, and why the fact that it means nothing is exactly why it works. Here's the part that should stop you in your tracks. This isn't even a new kind of phenomenon. Kids have been doing this exact thing for over 100 years. The only difference now is that it spreads to an entire planet in about 3 weeks instead of staying in one neighborhood forever. Once you see how old this trick actually is, 6-7 stops looking random and starts looking almost inevitable. Let's start at the actual origin, because it's dumber and more specific than you'd expect. There's a song by the rapper named Skrilla with the hook 6-7 in it. Around the same time, basketball fans were making highlight edits of NBA player LaMelo Ball, who happens to be exactly 6'7" tall, and using the song as the soundtrack. Two completely unrelated things, a song lyric and a guy's height, accidentally lined up. Then in mid-2025, a kid at a youth basketball game got caught on camera yelling 6-7 at the camera while doing a strange up and down palm-flicking gesture with his hands. The kid, now known across the internet simply as 6-7 Kid, became the face of the entire meme. His energy was so unhinged and specific that it gave the phrase an actual character to attach to. Not just words, a whole persona. From there, it did something almost no meme manages to do. It escaped the internet completely and invaded real physical space. Kids started shouting it in hallways, in classrooms, mid-lecture, the second teacher said any number containing a 6 or a 7, at fast food counters loud enough that an actual major restaurant chain changed its internal ordering system just to avoid saying it out loud. This wasn't staying in an app. It became something you could witness happening in the real world, constantly, everywhere, for no reason anyone could fully explain. And here's where it gets almost funny in how self-aware it became. Teachers, understandably exhausted, started banning the phrase outright. Hundreds of schools across the US and Europe made an actual rule. You cannot say 6 and 7 back to back unless it was genuinely part of a math lesson. You'd think a ban would kill a trend. It did exactly the opposite. The second something becomes forbidden, it becomes funnier to say. Kids weren't just chanting a meaningless phrase anymore. They were chanting a meaningless phrase that adults were actively terrified of. That combination is basically rocket fuel for a 12-year-old. So now we get to the actual question worth asking. Why did this specific nonsense phrase, out of the infinite amount of nonsense generated online every single day, become the one that took over the entire world? And the honest answer is almost disappointing in how simple it is. It worked precisely because it doesn't mean anything. Here's the logic. If a phrase has a specific meaning, it only works in specific situations. But 6-7 can get dropped into literally any sentence, any classroom moment, any random conversation, because it's not saying anything. It's a pure sound and rhythm. That means it has infinite flexibility. You can use it constantly, in every context, and it never stops technically fitting. Compare that to something like Riz, which at least means something specific. Charisma. Game. With people you're into. 6-7 doesn't even have that. It's just a fun-sounding combination of syllables paired with a physical gesture. And that emptiness turned out to be its superpower. Now here's the twist that actually connects this to something way bigger than one dumb meme. Researchers who studied children's culture actual serious academics, have been documenting this exact pattern for decades, long before phones existed. There's a famous body of research from a pair of researchers who spent years collecting playground chants, rhymes, and phrases kids used that had zero actual meaning. Things chanted because they sounded good, felt good to say together, or filled awkward silence. Their conclusion was that nonsense phrases like this aren't a malfunction of kid culture. They're one of the oldest, most consistent features. Kids have always made up meaningless sounds to say together as a group. 6'7" isn't a new phenomenon. It's an ancient one, wearing a 2026 outfit. Think about it from your own life for a second. Did you grow up shouting Kobe every time you threw literally anything into a trash can? Singing a nonsense rhyme about sardines and pork and beans that nobody could explain the origin of? Doing a chant with hands clapping that had no actual logical meaning, just a rhythm everyone agreed on? That's the exact same mechanism. The packaging changes every generation. The underlying trick stays identical. So here's reason number 1 this spreads so hard. It's not really about the phrase, it's about the group. When you yell 6'7" at the exact moment someone says a number, and 3 other kids yell it back instantly, that's not really communication in the normal sense. It's a synchronized signal that says, I'm paying attention to the same frequency you are. The content is basically irrelevant. The synchronization is the entire point. Reason number 2, the forbidden fruit effect. The second adults start banning it, it's treating it as a disruption, getting visibly frustrated by it. That frustration becomes part of the reward. Every time a teacher sighs and says we don't say that in the classroom, that reaction is basically a 5-star review from the kid's perspective. Getting a genuine visible reaction out of an adult for something this dumb is the joke. Reason 3, and this one's honestly the most impressive part. The internet turned it into an evolving, ongoing story instead of a one-time gag. Once the original meme started fading, creators didn't let it die. They mutated it. People started editing the original 6'7" kid's face into unsettling horror story-style versions, connecting him to an entirely unrelated online horror mythology, giving him a creepy alter ego nickname. A meme about a basketball and a rap lyric somehow grew a horror movie spin-off. That's not luck. That's an entire decentralized community collectively deciding to keep a joke alive by constantly reinventing it. And reason 4, the one that made it genuinely inescapable. Real-world institutions couldn't resist getting pulled in, which just fed the fire further. A government official accidentally made the hand gesture on camera during an official school visit and had to publicly apologize for it. Lawmakers have referenced it during actual government sessions, half joking. A restaurant chain changed its internal systems because of it. Once actual institutions start reacting to your meme, it stops being a kid thing and becomes a genuine cultural event that adults have to acknowledge whether they want to or not. That crossover moment is where a meme stops being replaceable and becomes historic. Now let's talk about the criticism, because there's a real one worth taking seriously, not just dismissing. Some psychologists and educators have pointed out something worth sitting with: the sheer speed and scale at which something like this spreads. A phrase with literally no content, purely built for reflexive repetition, might be training attention spans to expect instant, low-effort reward instead of sustained focus. That's not a wild claim. If your brain gets a hit of group approval and laughter every single time you blurt something out reflexively, that's a pattern that can bleed into how you approach slower, harder things, actual conversations, actual schoolwork, and actual patience. But here's the pushback worth hearing too, because it's just as legitimate. Kids have literally always done this. The nonsense rhymes, the meaningless playground chants, the Kobe shout, none of that was secretly rotting anyone's brain in a permanent way. Most of us grew out of our own version of this and turned out completely fine. The actual researchers who study this stuff tend to land on the same point. Meaningless kid culture phrases aren't a new danger. They are a constant of childhood that just happens to look extremely loud right now because it's amplified by billions of phones instead of one playground. So the honest, non-dramatic answer is, this probably isn't secretly destroying anyone's brain, but the speed at which it spreads and the sheer scale of repetition it hits is genuinely new. That part's worth being aware of. Not because the phrase itself is dangerous, but because it's a preview of how fast something completely meaningless can now capture global attention, purely through repetition and group reward, with zero actual content behind it. That's a bigger, more useful thing to notice than the phrase itself. Here's my actual take, no drama. 6'7" isn't secretly deep, and it's not secretly dangerous either. It's just the current version of something humans have always done, making up sounds to say together because the saying together part feels good. The phrase changes every generation. Yours happened to get a viral basketball kid, a rap lyric, and a horror mode spin-off attached to it. That's honestly a pretty entertaining version to have gotten. What is worth paying attention to is the pattern behind it, not the phrase itself. Content with literally zero meaning, purely built around reflexive repetition, can now reach more people faster than any organized message in human history. And it does that by hijacking the same let's do this together instinct kids have always had, just running it through a global amplifier instead of a single schoolyard. Recognizing that mechanism is a genuinely useful skill for understanding basically everything else that goes viral after this too. And honestly, 100 years from now, some historian is going to have to explain to a room full of confused students why an entire generation of humans lost their mind over the numbers 6 and 7, and why an actual restaurant chain restructured its ordering system because of it. That's not embarrassing. That's just what it looks like to be alive during a viral moment. Every generation gets one. This is yours, and it's generally one of the weirder ones on record. So the next time your teacher says a math problem out loud and half the class erupts into 6-7, you'll know exactly what's happening. 100-year-old kid tradition running at internet speed, powered by nothing but rhythm, rebellion, and the simple joy of getting reaction. It's never really about numbers. It never is.